European influence in West Africa began when Portuguese ships began sailing down the western coast, searching for a passage to the spices and riches of the Orient. As more countries began sending ships into African waters, stations and forts were built along the West African coast. Because the West African coast was the nearest part of the continent to the European holdings in Middle and South America, it became the center for the slave trade to the Americas. But the slave trade was not a new enterprise. For centuries, the Arabs had been paying African middlemen from the Sudan, as well as the East African coast, for slaves to be exported to North Africa and Asia. But the European entry into the slave trade had drastic economic consequences for West Africa. African middlemen became rich and powerful, as did the coastal states from which they operated. But the savanna states of the interior grew weak and unstable as their people lived under the constant threat of raids, capture, and enslavement.
All right, Shalom. I want to give all the praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahushai Bahasham Rakah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who taught me this truth. Shalom to the hopeful elect. All right, so I wanted to go back through the point that I was making in the response video that I did on Candace Owens exposes the hidden truth behind slavery in the United States. All right, and I was making points in the video about how the enslavement of our people was a world business by the heathen nations, right? So before we get into it, I wanted to kind of set it up with this. So this photo that you see here, I came across this photo when I first came into the truth. I was at the flea market and I saw this little poster. And, you know, in the spirit, I was like, yo, this is Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 68. And I had got it framed. But you see here, it says this, the African slave trade, which is really the Israelite slave trade, because we're not Africans. All right, you see that the house of Judah, okay, the southern kingdom was scattered throughout the world. All right, and this is what happened. If I can zoom in here real quick. All right, bear with me. Set this book down. You zoom in here. All right, you can see the routes, you know. You see the slave sign from the 1700s, which goes into the selling of Negroes. All of that, right? Now, the reason why I'm showing this because I want to add, bear with me, I want to add the this book in here, right? So let's pull that out. And I'll pull this back a little bit more. All right, so I want to just add this book real quick. And this, you know, I actually saw this video of a brother breaking this down when I first came in as well. And just wanted to add on to what you see in the photo here. But anyway, from this book is from, it says Ibos, Hebrew Exiles from Israel, Amazing Facts and Revelations by Professor O. Elazee. All right, this is what he looks like here in the back. All right, but I want to go here, as we saw. All right, let's pull this first. So just like you see here, all right, Negroes for sale, but before it was Hebos. Right? It's the same photo. Right? This is out of the book again, Ibos, Hebrew Exiles from Israel. Right? This is page 10. Right? And it says historical evidence of Ibo population percentage in American society. It says, quote, and this is page 10. It says, this place is a wholesale market for slaves, as not fewer than 20,000 are annually sold here, 16,000 of whom are natives of one nation called Hebos. Ibos said that so that this single nation has not exported a less number of people during the last 20 years. It says then 320,000, and those of the same nation sold at the new and old caliber probably amounted to 50,000 or more, making an aggregate amount of 370,000 Hebos. The remaining part of the 20,000, the above 20,000 is composed of natives of the brass country called Alakus, and also of the Ibios or Quas, right? It says, second paragraph here, it says, fairs were the slaves of the Hebo nation. It says, fairs where the slaves of the Hebo nation are obtained and held every 5 or 6 weeks at several villages, which are situated on the banks of the rivers and creeks in the interior, right? It says the Hebos, to judge by the immense number annually sent into slavery into chains with iron yoke on their necks, right? Which you read about that in Deuteronomy, right? Real quick. All right, because that's prophecy, right? Deuteronomy 28. Let's get that real quick and we'll finish it off. Right? Deuteronomy 28 and verse 48. Deuteronomy 28 verse 48 says, therefore thou shalt serve thy enemies, which the Lord Yahweh Shemel shall send against thee in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in the want of all things, and he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he had destroyed thee. Right? So this is what happened, man. We went into slavery and our people had yokes of iron upon their neck, and you could actually look up the images. Anyway, right, finishing that last part, it says, matter of fact, that's all we need from there. Let's read this last page and then we'll get into the lesson. All right, just adding on to what we see here. All right, so again, this is from the same book. This is from page 54, chapter 7. It says, Jewish origin of the Ibos, perspectives from history and divine revelation. It says the first British explorers who met the Ibos of Nigeria were quick to identify them as a branch of Hebrews. Based in 1938, it so simply referred them to as Hebrews, Hebos, Ebos, and later Ibos, all right, which we just read in chapter 1, all right? So again, these people have always known who we are. And the point we want to get into again is that, you know, the slavery of our people was world business, all right? Okay, so getting back to the main topic of this lesson here, going into the enslavement of our people was world business amongst the heathen nations, okay? And this is just a quick land back off the response video that I did going into Candace Owens exposes the hidden truth behind slavery in the United States, okay? So again, the enslavement of the so-called Negro, Latino, Native American, and Hispanic was world business amongst our enemies, all right? And that's the point I want to get into here because, you know, I'm glad that this topic came up so we can dive deeper into the fact that it wasn't just Esau that was behind the slave trade. Because remember, the scriptures say in Revelation that we would be the slaves, we would be the gifts that were sold. Let's get that. Just thinking out loud, Revelation 11. Okay. Revelation 11 and 9, it says, and they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves, right? So going into the curses, that 350 years, okay, our people were regarded as not the Lord's people. Okay, we were in that dead state of mind. Okay, we weren't called the Israelites. We were called by every other name under heaven. Okay, Black, Hispanic, Latino, Native American, okay, Indian, Afro-American, okay, Spics, Beaners, you know, all those proverbs and bywords, man, that were put upon our people, all right? It says, read that part again. It says, Revelation 11 and 9, it says, and they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. So here it is. You know, our people lived, you know, their whole lives as slaves, you know, underneath this system, not knowing that they were the Israelites, man. So we didn't have a proper burial, a proper rest, because we died not knowing that we were the true sons of the Most High. So they suffer not our dead bodies to be put in graves, right? Verse 10, the point. And remember, all the nations
We're all in on this, man. They all know who we are, right? Revelation 11 and 10. And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them, right? And make merry and shall send gifts one to another, because these two prophets tormented them that dwell on the earth, right? Going back into the northern and southern kingdom. All right. And we were the gifts. Okay. We were the gifts. We were the slaves. All right. That were scattered afar off. Okay. So again, tying it all together, slavery, the enslavement of our people was world business amongst the heathen. Again, as we read Psalms 83 in the chat GPT, it says a confederacy to cut Israel off. Key theme: organized heathen nations unite to erase Israel as a people. And this is what they did, and they continue to do. Okay? And when you read the chapter, it names names. Okay? Psalms 83 and 5, for they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. That word confederate, let's bring that out real quick. Okay, they are confederate against thee. All right? Covenant, alliance, pledge between men. Okay? Treaty, alliance, league, man to man, constitution, agreement, pledge. So all these heathen nations came together as a covenant, as a pledge, okay, to destroy the Lord's people, which is found in prophecy, as we were reading Psalms 83, Psalms chapter 2. All right, they came together with one consent, the scripture said, man. Right? It says they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee, the tabernacles of Edom. Okay? The Ishmaelites of Moab and the Hagarnes, Gebal and Ammon and Amalek. Okay? The tiny tops. Right? So you're talking about the Ishmaelites, the so-called Arabic nations, the Edomites, the so-called European, okay, the so-called white man, Amalek, the so-called JOO, all right, Chinese, Japanese, Ham, so-called indigenous Africans, Philistines, with the inhabitants of Tyre. Ashur is also joined with them. They have hope in the children of Lot, Salah. Do unto them as the Midianites, as to Sisera, as to Jabin at the brook of Kison, which perished at Endor. They became as dung for the earth. Make their nobles like Oreb and Zeb, yea, all their princes as Zebah and Zalmunna. It says, who said, let us take ourselves the houses of the Most High in possession, right? So all these nations are involved in the destruction of our people, man. All right? So anyway, moving on here, right? Had another part that I wanted to pull up in the chat because I had put it in. I said the enslavement of the black and Latino, Hispanic, and Native American Indian peoples / tribes was a world business. Then I put in all the slave trades: transatlantic slave trade, the trans-Saharan slave trade, Dutch slave trade, Native American slave trade, and other slave trades proved with history. All right, so this is what we got. All right, and we'll get back to the scriptures as well. So it says, what you're saying is historically accurate, right? The late medieval period through the 19th century, human enslavement, especially African, Indigenous American, and mixed ancestry peoples, all right? This is all the tribes, okay? This is all the tribes here, right? It says was a global interconnected economic system. An act, not the act of a single nation or people. Below is a documented historical breakdown using established academic history, right? It says, number one, slavery as a world business, not local practice. This is what we're telling you, man. Okay? And you in these Edomites and the rest of these nations are not going to get away from this. It says slavery existed earlier in many civilizations, but from 700 AD to the 1800s, it became a global commercial system tied to international trade routes, banking and insurance, empires and colonial expansion, agricultural, mining, and infrastructure, This is why historians call it chattel slavery, not commercial slavery, not merely servitude, okay? So let's get that established, right? Number 2, it says trans-Saharan slave trade 700 to 1900 AD. Who ran it? Arab Muslim empires, Ishmael. As we just read in Psalms 83, the Ishmaelites. North African states, Ottoman empires, Edomites. African intermediaries, all right? These were the Hamites, man. Okay? Who was enslaved? So-called black Africans from West, Central, and East Africa. This is why I had the photo in the beginning. Okay, the western interiors of Africa, where you had the Judites located, man, the Southern Kingdom. Okay, because they were scattered all throughout Africa: West Africa, East Africa, North Africa, and South Africa. Right? These were all Israelites. These were the people who were enslaved. All right, the Southern Kingdom. Women, children, soldiers, laborers. Scale estimates range to 10 to 17 million Africans or Israelites. Okay, 10 to 17 million Israelites. Lasted over 1,200 years, longer than any Atlantic trade. Destinations: North Africa, Middle East, Persia, and India. All right, this is what happened. Understand this, okay? Understand the scattering of what happened. When we came out of the western interiors of Africa, we were scattered all over the earth, man. Okay, there's no way you can get that confused. There's no way you can say that you can't understand it. This is what happened, man. Again, the slavery of the Israelites was world business by the heathen nations, man, our enemies. All right? And I got a little bit more I want to get into this as well. All right? Let's grab this scripture too. This is Baruch. This is Baruch chapter 3, verse 8. It says, "Behold, we are yet this day in our captivity, where thou hast scattered us," right? "For a reproach and a curse, and to be subject to payments according to all the iniquities of our fathers, which departed from the Lord Yahweh Shem Yahushua our power." To this day, man. All right, this is how it happened. All right, all 12 tribes. All right, let's go back. Right, again, 10 to 17 million Israelites. Destinations: North Africa, Middle East, Persia, India. You got Jake all up in there, man. Uses: domestic labor, military slaves, Maluks, agricultural labor, sexual slavery, especially women. Document by Ibn Khaldun al-Masudi, Bernard Lewis, and the UNESCO studies on African diaspora. All right, the scattering of the Israelites. All right, transatlantic slave trade, 1500s, 1888. Who ran it? Portugal, Edomites, Spain, Edomites, Britain, Edomites, France, Edomites, Netherlands, Edomites, Denmark, Edomites, colonial America, Edomites, Brazil, Edomites, because who was up in Brazil? The Portuguese. Okay, so-called European, the Edomites. Who was enslaved? Primarily black Africans. All right, Israelites, man. Because a lot of Jake came from, as we saw here, the Judites came out of the western interiors of Africa into Brazil. In the islands. Okay, everywhere, right? Scale: 12.5 million Israelites shipped. 10.7 million Israelites survived the Middle Passage. Destinations: Brazil, largest recipient. Yeah, it's a lot of slaves out that were imported to Brazil. Caribbeans, the islands, Spanish America, British North America, United States. All right. Economic reality: enslaved Israelites were collateral for loans, insured cargo, bought, sold, bred, and inherited. See? fueled sugar, cotton, tobacco, rice, coffee, bacon empires, Lloyds of London, etc. This was industrialized human trafficking, okay, which is another name for slavery. All right, we were sold for products and goods. We were traded, right? What's that? Joel 3:3. And it reads, it says, and they have cast lots for my people. That's the auction blocks where they sold us off. And they have cast lots for my people and have given a boy for a harlot. All right. What's the word I want to use for YouTube purposes? All right. Again, this child trafficking shit that you see today was going on back then. Okay. Boys were being used and abused. And they showed you that in that movie, Goodbye, Uncle Tom. They were selling little boys off. They had them painted up with makeup. Right? It says, and sold a girl for wine that they might drink. Yeah, they sold our daughters. Again, in that movie, Goodbye, Uncle Tom, they had the girls painted up. They had them, as young as 8 to 9 years old, twerking nude in front of the slave masters, man. They showed you that shit in the movies. Okay? This is our history. And you think that these nations going to get away from this? They're not going to not be judged? You know? Let's get some more. All right. It says Dutch slave trade, Dutch West India Company in 1621-1792 activities transported Israelites to the Caribbean, Suriname, Brazil under Dutch control, New Netherlands, New York. All right. Role major slave traders even after Spain, Portugal began controlled shipping, insurance ports, auctions. Amsterdam became a global financial hub party due to slave profits. You see that? So when we say we were literally scattered across the world to the four corners of the earth, the Lord meant that, man. Native American indigenous slave trade, often erased but extensively documented, right? Yeah, you had Gad that was in yokes of iron, okay, that were put on them slave ships with Judah. Okay, this is a history that you can't get away from real fast before we go back into the read, because you got niggas that say that the Northern Kingdom tribes, the Latinos, Hispanic, Native Americans, and Hebrews, right? So just go back, because I want to show all this stuff just for the spirit, man. Lord willing, this is edifying, man. But I wanted to put everything in this, just to show you. There's no way you can get around the truth and prophecy.
Shalom Aleichem, Jackson 2 Bears. Mr. Balloon, what's the use of saying Shalom Aleichem to me? I'm a full Sioux Indian. I'm not one of the chosen people. Oh.
Shalom Aleichem means peace be upon you, is a greeting in the Hebrew language. The general community thought Shalom Aleichem was in the Chickasaw language. Let's keep going.
All right, go ahead being stubborn if you want. Well, I ain't stubborn. Oh, not much you ain't. According to an ex-congressman of these United States I heard give a lecture at the Jatapa this winter, Indians is the lost tribe of Israel, but he won't admit it.
Were the mound builders. Everybody had an opinion. And David's opinion agreed with a lot of other people, although it was ridiculed. That is, that they were at least descendants of the lost tribes of Israel. Because after all, the Indians were savages and they could not have built geometric works such as these. So when David discovered stones with Hebrew on them, then the trouble began. When David discovered stones with Hebrew on them, then the trouble began.
There you go. Exactly. It's too much evidence. It's too much, it's just too much history, man. You can't get around it, man. All right? Slavery, the enslavement of our people was world business, man. All right? Let's keep going, man. Right? Not to be all over the place, right? Let's see if we get some more, right? So anyway, number 5, again, Native American indigenous slave trade, often erased but extensively documented. A, early Spanish enslavement, Columbus enslaved Taino people, 1490s. It says Encomienda system, forced labor, millions died from overwork, violence, and disease, man. So anybody that's speaking otherwise, saying that the Northern Kingdom ain't part of the tribes, you're a complete fucking bug out, man. All right. And you ain't got the spirit. Okay. Anyway, B, English and colonial native slave trade, 1600s, 1700s. Who was enslaved? Southeastern tribes, Creek, Yamasee, Choctaw, Cherokee, Appalachee, captured during wars and raids. Okay? Where were they sent? Caribbean, Barbados, Jamaica. This is why you have something called West Indians, man. You got a lot of Northern Kingdom tribes that were scattered amongst the Caribbean, right? Down there with the Southern Kingdom. New England, Southern colonies, scaled, tens of thousands exported, mainly more enslaved locally. Historian Alan Gallay calls it the Indian slave trade, a former economic system. See that? Right? Let's get some more. Okay. Matter of fact, before we read on, let's get some scriptures. All right. Because, hey, as I said, what happened, no other nation could compare to what happened to Jerusalem, man. All right. This is Daniel 9:7. O Lord, Yahweh Shemel Shai, righteous belongeth unto thee, but unto us confusion of faces, as it is this day. The men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem and unto all Israel that are near and that are far off, through all the countries whither thou hast driven them, because of their trespass that they have trespassed against thee. Throughout all the countries whither the Most High has driven us, man. Okay, everywhere, all over to the four corners of the earth, right? And like I said, this is just the transatlantic slave route. What about all the other slave routes? The millions of our people that were scattered, that were genocide, that were thrown off them ships, that were put to death. Millions, right? Reading on, it says, Potosi silver mines, millions of indigenous deaths, fueled Spanish global empire, silver financed Europe and China trade. B, Afro-Latino slavery. Brazil alone enslaved 5 million Israelites. Cuba, Puerto Rico, Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, heavily enslaved. Okay, the Northern Kingdom. Latino identity today is deeply tied to so-called African plus indigenous enslavement. Okay, because why? Because they're part of the tribes, man. Okay, we're all intermingled and mixed up. Okay? Salakia. Let's go back. Number 7, slavery was integrated across empires. Slavery connected Europe, Africa, Middle East, Americas, Asia. It involved kings, popes, merchants, banks, universities, churches, governments. It was legal, taxed, insured, and inherited. Okay? Let's see if there's any more. All right? So yeah, that's the point, man. No way you can get around that, man. Millions, our people by the millions were enslaved, put to death, right? Here we go. And I just had, the ChatGPT just give me the total of millions of slaves that were captured during these different slave trade periods, right? So as we read the 10 to 17, the 10 to 12.5 million, right? Trans-Saharan slave trade, 17 to 20 million Israelites. Dutch slave trade, all right, 500 to 600,000 Israelites. Native American slave trade, 2 to 5 million of the Northern Kingdom tribes, all right, and they vary according to different scholars, all right, but you're talking about, again, slavery by the millions. You see, this is the real H cost. All right, if I could say it like that, you know what I'm talking about. All right, estimated captured across major historical slave systems, 29 to 36 million people. Right? They're saying 54 million here due to all these trades. And early on, they were saying it was over 200 million. See, high-end scholarly estimates that the true number is over 60 to 80 million people captured, man. You think these devils not going to pay these nations? Yeah, fucking right, man. This is why all nations are going into hardcore slavery. All right, bottom line, period. Okay? So let's move on. This is back in Daniel. Okay? Salaki for being all over the place. Daniel 9 and 7. O Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahushua, righteousness belongeth unto thee, but unto us confusion of faces as it is this day. And the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and unto all Israel that are near and that are far off, through all the countries whither thou hast driven them, because their trespass that they have trespassed against thee. Verse 8. O Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahushua, to us belongeth confusion of face, to our kings, to our princes, and to our fathers, because we have sinned against thee. To the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahushua, our power belong mercies and forgiveness, though we have rebelled against him. Verse 10, neither have we obeyed the voice of the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahushua, our power to walk in his laws, which he set before us by his servants the prophets. Verse 11, yea, all Israel have transgressed thy law, even by departing, that they might not obey thy voice. Therefore the curse is poured upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of the Most High, because we have sinned against him. And he have confirmed his words which he spake against us, and against our judges that judged us, by bringing upon us a great evil, for under the whole heaven have not been done as have been done upon Jerusalem. All right, going into what? Slavery, man. Us being scattered amongst every nation amongst the earth, man, by the millions, hundreds of millions, man. Okay, that happened to our people and no other nation, man. Okay, it says, as it is written, verse 13, as it is written in the law of Moses, all this evil has come upon us, yet we made not our prayer before the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahushua, our power, that we might turn from our iniquities and understand thy truth. You see that? Verse 14, therefore the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahushua, watched upon the evil and brought it upon us. The Lord brought this upon us, man. For the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahushua, our power is righteous in all his works which he doeth, for we obeyed not his voice. This is why we were put in this situation. Okay, we fell away from the Most High, and he punished us by allowing our enemies to capture us and put us in slavery. Right? I want to go here real quick as well. It says the global slave trade, the hidden history that shaped our world, right? Let me see if I can make this bigger. Okay, so it says, let me get down to the point. The many faces of the global slave trade. All right. The term slave trade often brings to mind the horrors endured by Israelite captives in the transatlantic trade. However, human trafficking existed in many forms across the world. The barbaric slave trade, active from the 16th and 19th century, saw an estimated of 1.25 million Europeans and captured and enslaved by North African pirates, blah, blah, blah. Right, let's get down. Hold on. Let's go down. All right. It says the transatlantic slave trade uprooted millions. All right, dealing with Jake. All right, here we go. The Arab and Indian Ocean slave trades. Slavery was not confined to the Atlantic world. In India, China, and Southeast Asia, millions were trafficked through various systems of debt bondage, military enslavement, and forced servitude. The Indian Ocean slave trade, active for over a millennium, connected East Africa with the Middle East, India, and even China. Enslaved individuals were often taken to serve soldiers, concubines, and laborers. The Arab slave trade, spanning over 1,000 years, had a lasting impact on African and Middle Eastern societies. Unlike the transatlantic trade, where most enslaved people were men, the Arab trade predominantly trafficked women and children, many of whom were integrated into households and harems. Okay? So there you go, man. So yeah, we'll leave it there. All right, again, you know, the enslavement of our people was global business, man. And it all adds into the prophecies written in the book, man. Baruch 4. All right. This is Baruch 4 and 5. It says, be of good cheer, my people, the memorial of Israel. You were sold to the nations not for your destruction, but because you moved the Most High to wrath. You were delivered unto the enemies. For you provoked him that made you by sacrificing unto devils and not to the Most High. You have forgotten the everlasting power that brought you up, and you have grieved Jerusalem that nursed you. For when she saw the wrath of the Most High coming upon you, she said, Hearken, all ye that dwell about Zion, for the Most High, it says, Yahweh Shemel Shai, have brought upon me great mourning. Verse 10, For I saw the captivity of my sons and daughters, which the everlasting brought upon them. All right? So no way around it, man. Okay? Slavery was world business. Shalom.